Right, hello folks, and welcome to this very special video interview with a fellow geologist and YouTuber, someone you probably know, maybe not so much by face, but more by name recognition, some of his great videos. We're joined today with Tim Catron, who is the content creator behind GeologyHub, which is an amazing resource. Tons of videos. Let me see what my numbers are here. 328,000 subscribers, over 1,300 videos. He is by far probably the most prolific and popular among the few of us out there working in the world of geology education in the YouTube format. So first of all, Tim, thanks for joining us. How are you today?
I'm doing pretty well. Glad to join you.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining us. The whole point of this video, along with the other interviews I've done with folks, is just getting to know you a little bit better. I think you've often in your videos been, the behind the scenes guy and the voice of your videos. But I think recently you've done a little more of a concerted effort to kind of show people who you are and stuff. And obviously agreeing to this is maybe part of that. Is that fair?
Yes. I mean, I a few months ago, I started putting an image of myself in Iceland at the end of my videos. The only for my Patreon and thank you YouTube members graphic, the only problem is it gets overlaid most of the time by my the end screen click-through options.
Oh, so it kind of gets run over by that real quick. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
that's what I've been attempting.
I think this is fun because I haven't seen all your videos, of course, but I'm a subscriber. I've seen many of them. And in looking at some of the comments and some of the videos, there's often like this, well, who is this person? And you've been kind of the mystery man. And so this is fun to see you kind of come out from behind the curtain. Maybe not totally your style, but I appreciate you doing this today because it may or may not be comfortable for you, but I appreciate it nonetheless. So thanks. All right, so yeah, let's just kind of get into your background a little bit, Tim. Maybe share with us a little bit about where you grew up. We don't need like the exhaustive childhood stories, but where you grew up, your origins, and then how you kind of became interested in science and geology in particular.
So I grew up in Eatontown, New Jersey. Yeah, it's an interesting town. The biggest thing in Eatontown at the time was Fort Monmouth, although oddly enough, my family was not military related. My mother's an architect. My father was computer science, although he was also technically a math major as well. He worked for a while at Bell Labs, IBM, AT&T. That's why we were there. And growing up, someone initially introduced me to computer science and programming. And that's what, for the longest time, I thought I was going to go into. But all the while, I was very interested in science. I started a rock collection because it was something just really interested me. Although you can't find too much in New Jersey.
Right. Yeah, it's a little tricky to supplement your rock collection.
Location, the Franklin Mine,
Hmm.
with the best, and I mean this, the single best fluorescent mineral locality on the planet, largely due to very fun zinc minerals like franklinite, which is the namesake.
Right. So this is like your kind of high school years or middle school years? Is that kind of?
Oh no, that's elementary.
Okay, this is childhood, right? Okay.
I mean, part of it I went to. I lived in Australia for 18 months.
Oh, interesting.
As a surprise trip after spending a week on Heron Island, a Great Barrier Reef island, my parents surprised me by driving 6 hours, maybe it was 8 hours, to the middle of nowhere to a town known as Emerald. And after you got to Emerald, you went to a town known as Rubyvale, which for you would Fossick, that's the Australian term for prospecting for sapphires and zircons. And we found so many, and I loved it.
So your parents kind of helped kind of nurture your interest in minerals and rocks and such at an early age.
Yeah. So I then came back to New Jersey. High school went well, still in computer science, gone to Arizona State University, still in computer science. And although it was already a year and a half ahead in computer science, I technically could have finished college in 2.5 years. As I was, I don't know how the best phrase for this. I was given classes that were sort of overviews of what a typical job would be like. and I was just dying on the inside. I did not like it. It was just my thoughts were I could do this, but I'd be bored to tears and hate my job for the rest of my life.
Right. So
And
go ahead. Sorry.
I didn't mean to interrupt you. You
Oh no, you're
can.
fine. I just wanted to clarify real quick. So you were finishing your computer science degree, um, and were taking classes, or somehow given an opportunity to look into what these careers would look like. You got a chance to see what you might be doing in 5, 10 years down the line, and you were not too fond of what that future looked like.
No.
Okay, that's good. It's good to figure things out early. So go ahead and finish
Um,
that part of the story.
so at the same time, you have to take science courses, so I chose to do geology because I knew it was something I could easily get a good grade in.
Right.
And I was in the honors college at the time, and I had to do a few honors projects, a certain number of honors credits, and I gave a presentation in front of a full class. And while a lot of them would, I wouldn't say literally sleeping, some of them would only be half paying attention.
Right. Typical.
And when I was there, I could tell they were fully paying attention. I was giving a overview of this um, mineral deposit I found. It wasn't a huge one, pretty small, but I mined from it to make gemstone material from it. And they were just so fascinated by it. And someone literally asked me at the end, why aren't you considering your career in geology? And although that wasn't the point that made me change, it's something that stuck with me, um, and partially led to me eventually fully changing my degree to geology and ending up graduating, the whole college experience only being 3.5 years.
Wow. So let me get this straight. So geology for you was a hobby. Computer science was sort of like the career focus, but then you
Mm.
had this real interesting experience where you maybe realized that, wow, I could turn geology from a hobby into more of a academic track, career focused thing. And even though could finish your computer science degree in pretty short amount of time, you switched to geology and still were graduating college after only 3.5 years. That's incredible.
Yeah, and um, I also liked the professors. They were good. And when looking at, well, I got a glimpse of what a typical geology career would be like, regardless of what it was, well, 90% of the positions that were typical, I could really enjoy them. I liked physically moving around
Yeah,
and
being outdoors. Yeah,
yeah.
right. Yeah, and that's what attracts, I think, a lot of people in geology. Can we back up a little bit? How does someone from New Jersey end up deciding to go to Arizona for college? I'm interested in that part of the story.
So I got a good SAT score, but because of I mean, when I started, there were three portions. Now only two of them matter. And I think when I went there, it was just math and was it reading comprehension or writing? I think it was writing and
Yeah, just
math
yeah.
that mattered. And although I got a decent score, I have never done that well on standardized tests. So I still got a score. I forget what it was that
Right,
a person would consider respectable, but it wasn't good enough to get a full ride to say, I don't know, Rutgers, Stanford,
right.
the big name schools.
Yeah,
So after going to a bunch of colleges around the country to just take a look and applying to all of them, I was down to three choices, with the most important factor being, of course, how much I like the area and the campus, but also how much money they'd be giving me as a scholarship because college is really expensive and I
right,
didn't want to go into a lot of debt. And the three options were Oklahoma, University of Oklahoma, Purdue, and Arizona State. And I just liked Arizona State so much
right,
more than the others. Also, they were giving me more money.
right. So you got a good scholarship offer that helped offset a lot of the expenses, and you came out and visited and liked the area. And had you traveled in the West before? Had you like gone on trips and such in the West, and you kind of knew the landscape and
Yes.
the climate and stuff? Okay,
I
good.
forget how long it was before my last West trip before college because, well, I had lived in Dallas for a year-ish, year and a half. So I was already I had already gone a few times then,
Right.
but I forgot I must have Was I 8 years old when I first had a long trip to the West? And I must have been really young.
Yeah, yeah. Sometimes those things stick with us, and we, and then we go back to those places as like young adults or whatever, and there's something you remember about that experience that resonates with you, and you feel kind of connected to that location. So you end up at Arizona State. You switch career or majors. You go with geology. You get a bachelor's degree in geology. And then what were any other kind of formative moments or kind of anything that happened during that period where it helped cement your decision to major in geology, or you felt very validated in that?
So I kept bringing my best finds on occasion to my professors that I just find while prospecting, and it was minerals they wouldn't expect me to find because they're so absurdly rare, such as
Right.
what is now, I don't know, I don't know if it's a state mineral or a state gemstone, but it's wolfenite. This
Mm-hmm.
lead molybdenum mineral, bright orange. It's
Yeah.
absolutely beautiful. It's soft, but uh,
It's an
if you
attractive
find
mineral.
it
Yeah, it's
there,
awesome looking.
so it makes fantastic crystals. I would say it's even better than, I'm going to butcher the name, crocoite, which is a completely different family of mineral, but very similar colored crystals. And they just kept getting so impressed. And
Like, who is this guy? He keeps bringing all these weird, rare minerals to us.
exactly,
And you
exactly.
were finding those just locally around Arizona in that region, kind of. You were able
Plus
to.
or minus 120-mile radius from the
Sure.
campus, but yes.
That's pretty impressive. And so obviously minerals were a huge interest among, because geology is a huge, as we both know, is a huge spectrum of sort of subdisciplines, and you end up taking classes in most of those. So obviously mineralogy was something you were interested in. How did the volcano thing come about? Obviously you have a passion for volcanoes.
So it came about from three things. I'll cover the two easier ones first. So I absolutely love the geochemistry aspect and also ore deposits and how they formed. And as strange as this may sound, the simple answer is because I was really good with I forget what class it was. There wasn't a true volcanology class, but there
Yeah.
was a
It,
class with a very, very, very heavy focus on igneous rocks and I don't mean just the geochemistry course. There was another one, I forget the name of it.
right. Probably this is
And
igneous petrology would be my guess that the class you
I
were
think
in.
that is
Yeah.
it. I think that's it.
Right.
And so my mind has always worked in kind of strange ways. I was able to greatly understand volcanoes by simply knowing ore deposits, how they formed, and understanding how rocks get in place in various settings, simply looking at that and then reverse engineering to figure out how it most likely got there. And I just, that's a strange order of operations, but it worked for me.
Yeah, it clicked for you. I mean, yeah, and I see the connection between a lot of minerals are precipitated by, magmas or volcano lavas interacting with the surrounding host rocks, and you get the fact that you like the mineralogy, the geochemistry, and the volcanology. I mean, those do fit together quite nicely because they are integrated, and there's some processes there that are common.
Yeah, I even had this for the geochemistry course, this nice Romanian or no, I don't know, I think she was Romanian. She might have been Swiss, but she did this very nice presentation on the Siu volcano in Romania, a dormant system that still actively degasses quite a bit and has these two 30-ish thousand-year-old Mar explosion craters.
Yeah. Yeah, there's some really cool volcanic features in Europe that I was unaware of till I went over there. You kind of think of Europe as like the Alps and then a bunch of forest and river valleys, but there's
Yeah, minus Italy, of course,
yeah,
but
minus
Italy
Italy,
and
right? Yeah,
Greece.
I'm thinking like north of the Alps or whatever. So, well, cool. So you end up getting your bachelor's degree, and then what happened? What was your next? So then, you end up with a degree. Were you already planning next steps career-wise, or were you kind of in limbo? Or
So starting about 8 months before I graduated, which was in the winter of 2019. Yes, it is that year. So you know what's coming in
yes,
up in this
right.
conversation.
That's yeah, right before the
I started applying to every single entry level position in geology in the country, and because I'm a very heavy introvert, or not literally heavy. I'm a very strong, sorry, very strong introvert. I would really appreciate those super, super, super remote locations that no one wants. Also, they pay better because no one wants to do them.
Right. Isolated. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, like Alaska tundra north of the Arctic Circle. Oh, that's so me. At this gold mine, it was a nice possibility. And I even got a few interviews, but they never really went anywhere. So I'm like, oh, okay. It's
Yeah.
just sometimes it just takes a few months to find a position. So I graduated. The pandemic occurred, and then all the hiring positions just got shelved.
Right. So now we're spring 2020. You had just graduated the spring prior and been working on trying to get a job over that intervening
Mhm.
period. And now the pandemic descends and now everything's in chaos and positions aren't open.
Yeah, I did manage to get two brief part-time jobs that were related to just greenfield work. You can add what greenfielding means maybe as a text overlay if the audience doesn't know, because
Sure.
this is more of a geologist term.
Yeah. EPA
And
stuff. Yeah.
I ended up applying to, since I lived in Australia before, it would be easy for me to immigrate there again. So I applied for every geologist position that was open in the United States, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, even the United Kingdom, although I thought the UK positions were a bit of a stretch due to how far away it is.
Right.
I mean, it's also harder to immigrate there. And I got a few interviews, but I applied to more than 500
Oh my
positions.
goodness. Wow, you were persistent. You were
It,
covering all the bases.
but what interviews I did get, I I I think that they weren't really it seemed like the interviewers weren't trying to test me based on what I know or how well I could do in a position or even how well I get along with other people. It seemed like they were only looking for super agreeable extroverts that just were smiling 24/7 instead of, your typical somewhat eccentric scientist.
Yeah. Right, which kind of
And
played against your strengths and characteristics. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So starting the mining claims I had that I had in college prospected from, my mother started a small Etsy store called Prospecting Arizona, where we'd I'd find material largely chrysocolla, a little bit of turquoise, and sometimes jasper. She'd cut it into cabochons and make jewelry. And I had initially started a few videos on YouTube like a year or two before I graduated, and they were very simplistic, poorly made. A few people watching this may have even originally seen them, where my literal first video was due to my very strong and thorough expertise of gemstones. I could easily name the 10 most valuable gemstones on Earth. Like one of them is grandidiorite, another one's alexandrite, red beryl from Utah is one.
Mm-hmm. That's the only one I've heard of that you've named so far. The other two I haven't heard of. There's so many mineral names. Yeah.
Grandidiorite is it's a fun one. It's all the best specimens are only found in the southeastern corner of Madagascar. It's this deep blue mineral, and we both can't afford it, sadly.
Right. So you're doing these prospecting videos where you're out in the field finding the material, or you
Oh no,
videotaping more of like the preparation and like creating the cabochons with the materials? Oh, you just froze there.
ooh,
Oh,
wait.
there we go. You're good now.
Oh, it was largely an informational video,
Okay.
and so after getting very few views, I checked about a day, I checked a week later, nothing. Come back once I graduate, and I'm struggling to find position, and all of a sudden, my first two videos have 60,000 views each.
Those old videos on you. Oh, on the.
Yes.
Oh,
They,
wow.
they no longer exist on my channel because it
Right.
was hurting the overall algorithm on YouTube. But that gave me an idea. So I made another gemstone informational video about this. I think it was tanzanite because I'm not going to call Tanzanite a fad because it is truly beautiful, but it was a trendy gemstone.
Right. So you knew it would get some
And
attention. Yeah.
I thought I'd get some attention. 30 views. I'm like, ugh. So I try other topics like paleontology because I also know a decent amount of paleontology. Okay, it does a little bit better. What about this fun geologic formation? Yeah, it does okay. Okay.
Yeah. What do these people
Well,
want? Yeah. You're
I
trying to
loved
figure
my
out.
visit to Sunset Crater, Arizona's volcano that produced a nice lava flow and a cinder cone and a subplinian VEI4 eruption in 1085 CE.
Yeah. With
And
Native
I make a
Americans
video on
living
that.
there. Yeah.
Oh yeah, they witnessed it. They even put
They moved their pit houses out of the way. Yeah.
yeah, and also the corn they were growing at the time, they put it and make indentations on the lava flow, which are you can now see as artifacts of sorts.
Right.
And that got 300 views. So I did another one, and this time on the Dotsero volcano, that got 600 views. And so I just started making volcanoes of the various active volcano videos in the lower 48 US states. And my channel took off. I never looked back because people seemed to really appreciate my analysis. And it seemed like no one else was doing these in detail. There were a few articles I had seen on maybe it was Scientific American, maybe it was just general news on, oh, there's 2,000 volcanoes in the Western United States that very few people know of. And although that's somewhat misleading, they're largely referring to each cinder cone or vent in a field as one volcano, which
Right. So
isn't
they're counting
technically
more.
correct,
Yeah. Counting more than like just the source in the region. Right. The whole
but
field.
yeah, it's that is also got me to start this whole process, and my channel just went from there, and now it's my full-time job. It took
Yes.
off really fast.
So what was when did that happen? So at what if you can remember the timing of this? Like when? I mean, I imagine as you're making these videos, kind of hit and miss, and then there's a inflection point though where like you're onto something. The videos are doing much better. I'm assuming the subscriber counts are going up. Yeah, like what year and maybe what month was that if you can recollect? Doesn't have to be perfect, but just like
I'm checking my all-time statistics so I can just see for
okay.
myself.
Yeah, luckily they keep track of all that stuff. And at the same time, did you have like still applications out there and you were kind of hoping to get, more of a regular kind of position or
Yeah, I still had applications out there. So the takeoff point was December 2020, the very beginning.
okay.
That's when I started doing California volcanoes like Mammoth Mountain and Mount Shasta. People really like those. Just Californian geology/volcanology videos just seem to do well. Even did Lassen Peak, which
Yeah.
erupted 1914,
Well,
1917.
more people, it makes sense, right? There's a lot of people in the state, they're interested in their backyard. So, yeah.
Yeah, hiking is very popular in California in the West.
So, yeah, that's funny. We were kind of at the same time then, Tim, because I did my first like real videos. I was kind of like you, like there was just stuff out there, but I wasn't really serious about it. Mine was December 2020. I went to Death Valley with like an actual camera, not like something lousy, and did a few videos there. And they're still cringy. They're not good videos, but that's essentially when I was like, okay, I'm going to start doing more of these and just see where this goes. And it was still a side project. Yeah, so what has the last 4 years looked like for you then in terms of like obviously you hit a chord in 2020, late 2020, you put your energy and resources into this, and at some point it made enough, you had enough subscribers and videos that it was paying the bills, which is good. Maybe talk us through those 4 years and things you learned and kind of how it just grew during that period.
So when I started, I talked a lot faster. So I even physically counted. I would talk at 3.1 words per second, sometimes as high as 3.3. And although I was able to say everything I needed to say, and then some, and it was pretty concise. So my videos at the average length of 3.5 to 4.5 minutes. A lot of people were commenting that they couldn't understand it that well because I was talking too fast. So this is one thing I did. I eventually slowed down over time, and now my words per minute is somewhere between 2.4 and 2.6, which although it makes my videos a lot longer and I have to physically edit more background footage to keep people on page because I can't simply show the same graphic for longer because people will just naturally wander.
Yeah, right. You have to keep it
But
changing. Yeah,
that
dynamic.
is an improvement that I have gotten over time. Another interesting point is I have grown a pool of contacts that not only are geologists in various countries, but work for the USGS equivalents in different parts of the planet. And I reach out to those people when I have an initial suspicion that something is occurring. And also sometimes they give me minor amounts of insider information. Like a recent example is Tonga, the Home Reef volcano. It's erupted, formed a new island 2022,
Yeah,
small eruption there 2023, 2024 earlier this year. Well, I noticed on satellite that there were some new thermal signatures, which is the exact same thing we witnessed the last three times it erupted, which means it's definitely erupting again. So I went to notify them. Nothing is wrong with the Tonga Geological Service. It's just they hadn't posted anything about it, probably because no one lives nearby, no one could see it. The plume was small.
right.
And also, the Tongan economy isn't that large because it's very reliant on remittances. So a lot of the geology they do, and don't trust me, the people in Tonga are fantastic. They're great experts, they're knowledgeable. It's just they don't have a lot of money to work with.
Yeah,
And as a
resources
result,
and instruments, right? Yeah.
exactly. And as a result, sometimes another place of how to reach out to before is Papua New Guinea, just because they don't have as much infrastructure to physically monitor volcanoes. There's some exceptions, but sometimes they just need a third party to give them information they may not otherwise have noticed.
Yeah,
And
they have
that's what I like to do.
limited data, right? So do
Mm.
you I mean, that's one thing that's impressive about, for my perspective, of your channel is, I focus on a couple volcanoes that I'm familiar with and I have contacts there, but I feel like you cover the whole planet. Like you're
Oh
covering
yeah.
volcanoes I've never heard of in remote parts of the world and providing interesting data and insights. And I'm always like, where did he get that information? And how does he know that, I'm always impressed by your ability to pool those resources together and then deliver it in a way that people understand.
So as strange as it may sound, a lot of those volcanoes I've discussed, I already knew a lot about beforehand, even the ones in, say, Russia, because I had just been reading hundreds and hundreds and eventually thousands and thousands of various scientific papers just going on. So, although there's the old statement about Wikipedia not being totally reliable, one, it's better than people say, at least for the big name articles. But
Yeah,
more importantly, the sources they provide are generally quite good.
yeah,
So
and
I
that's
simply go to, like, if you go on Google and you put the double air quotes around a word, instead of just seeing what's the best result, it will only include results that specifically include that word or phrase. So in my case,
hmm,
that would be PDF, or sometimes the website such as ResearchGate or Nature.
right.
And that's how I start reading lots and lots of scientific papers, use my knowledge. Sometimes I'd even, for fun, see if I disagree with the interpretation of data in a scientific paper. Sometimes I would. It's a lot more fun, even if they find something interesting, they note it, but they don't know why it's there. For example, at the Kudryavy volcano on the Kuril Islands, Russia, there is the volcano outputs between 10 and 20 metric tons of the rarest stable element, or one of the rarest stable elements on the planet, called rhenium.
Hmm,
Through just its fumaroles and placing the mineral rhenite. And if you could capture all that releases, which would normally be, I'm thinking it was like 0.1, 0.3 parts per billion. It's 10 times rarer than gold. Not worth
wow.
as much as gold, but it's worth a fair amount.
Yeah, it has value.
You could control 60% of the world's supply.
Holy cow. Just that one source. Yeah.
There's that one source. And my hypothesis is, so in Arizona, there is this locality that surprisingly was a molybdenum, largely through molybdenite ore, was mined for a period, not associated with copper, surprisingly. And it had, so molybdenum tends to have higher concentrations of rhenium associated with it, just like the mineral pyrite tends to have a lot of nickel inclusions
Yeah, it's just
associated with it.
right. It just has associated elements that are bonded to or associated with that element, right?
Yeah, also the plus or minus 15% ionic size, plus or minus or
Right.
equal to
Yeah, substitution
ionic
of
charge.
yeah,
Exactly.
substitution of atoms, right?
And this one had absurdly high rhenium values of 400 parts per million. And someone had it sent me a piece of that because I was just, it's such a, although it's just molybdenite to the regular person, I know for a fact it has 400 parts per million rhenium, which makes it so much more fun and
Yeah.
cool to me.
Yeah.
And my hypothesis is that for whatever reason, there was already a large existing molybdenite deposit, whether it was buried beneath the island through intrusive activity or some old black smoker vent type thing that just got covered with eventual volcanics that the magma is interacting with, somehow separating the rhenium preferentially compared to the molybdenum and concentrating it, maybe due to density, maybe to another factor,
Mm-hmm.
and then rising to the surface as uh, in the gaseous, very fine particulates.
Right.
That's my educated guess, and we don't
Interesting.
know for sure still.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's just a interesting kind of little side note there. So, yeah, so it sounds like you acquire your knowledge. I mean, it sounds like you're reading a lot of the primary literature, diving into the
Mhm.
papers, educating yourself, and then going and making the videos. I'm always impressed with your pace because I don't know if you always did this, but at least the last year or more, it seems like you're putting out a video every day, which is
Yep.
incredibly ambitious pace.
Oh yeah, it is definitely quite difficult, and I'm hoping to eventually reduce my load to 3 or 4 videos a week, but I'm not there quite yet.
Yeah, and the fact you're able to, do you have like a backlog of topics and videos like that are like,
Oh yes.
or do you come in every day and you're
Um,
like, what am I going to do today? Like you're planned out and scheduled a bit.
well, a little bit of both. So of course there's these spontaneous things like major earthquake, volcanic eruption no one was really expecting, or some
Yeah, things happen in the
uh,
news, right?
so news obviously gets highest criteria. I have hundreds of notepad app notes I've made on my iPhone of just video ideas that people have suggested what I personally want to do as well. And I occasionally look at those from time to time. Although I will admit, sometimes I also do spontaneous topics. But so, for example, here's a few videos I'm slowly working on. In Vermont in 1849, or maybe it was 1847, I'll have to double check the original date. They, while building a railroad in the western part of the state at about 200 feet above sea level, they found the remains of a beluga whale
In Vermont,
in Vermont.
among all those crystalline rocks, or like that's pretty, or
Buried in
obviously it'd be in the much younger like Pleistocene stuff,
buried
or
in clay and mud,
okay.
and I'm discussing why that's the case and that it is dated to 11,250 years old.
Mm-hmm.
It turns out that that area was below sea level during the last ice age, or at least a little bit after the last glacial period ended, because
Right.
technically we're still in the ice age, but let's not push on that. And it pushed down the rock by about 600 feet due to the more than mile thick of ice that retreated. You get
Mm,
isostatic rebound,
right.
and it was filled with the Champlain Sea, which is an arm of the Atlantic Ocean.
Interesting.
And that's how it got there because there really were, there's even a humpback whale fossil, but not in Vermont. They're just another part of the original Champlain Sea.
Right. So are those kind of stories the ones that kind of captivate you the most, the kind of like geologic mysteries and
Oh,
I
yes.
mean, those are definitely good storylines, and I think those are the kinds of things viewers like. And you do such a good job of like presenting it kind of from start to finish. You're a good storyteller, and I don't know if that's something you were born with or developed over time, but you do a good job of like introducing the topic, looking at the evidence, which is a great thing as a scientist, and then kind of looking at your interpretation or others' interpretations. So that's a cool story. I was not aware of that, but yeah, we'll have to look for that going forward. So
Yeah, it was, oh gosh, I had my note down. There was a nickname for the fossil. I'm just double checking what it was again. Oh, the Charlotte whale. That's what it's
okay,
called.
yeah,
Because it
interesting.
was found near Charlotte.
Yeah, in Vermont. That's crazy. How interesting. Well, how would you describe if you had to describe your channel to new viewers, how would you like in a sentence or two, what would you say? If someone's like, I've never heard of Geology Hub, what's it all about? What's your kind of like pitch for that?
Breakdown of geologic events, largely volcanic eruptions and volcanoes, and general analysis about fun and interesting geologic topics and findings.
Okay, that's pretty good. I think that's pretty succinct. And I know you've been to Iceland a couple times now and done some short little videos there. What do you
Yes.
what do you see as like the future? Do you think you're going to keep doing the same sort of things, or do you have ideas to do maybe more field videos or something with other people or different
You mean
topics?
trip-wise
Sure. Well,
or video
anything.
or
Well,
so
video wise, like what for your channel, like do you see yourself kind of doing what you're doing? You're obviously successful at it, or do you have some other kind of venues or pathways you want to explore?
so I definitely want to start doing occasional much longer videos because while not all of my long videos do well, my best video of the year was something that my channel friend Earthquake Sim actually sponsored me to do on the next Cascadia subduction zone megathrust earthquake. And because it's difficult to model that, I decided, okay, well, we know a lot about the last one in 1700. Why don't I just simply take the known data from that and simply superimpose it over the modern world? And
Mm,
I mentioned as such, and that did super well.
right.
People were
Oh, you froze right there. Oh, there you go. People were what? Say that again.
rightfully concerned because of where they live, such as on
Yeah, yeah,
very southern Vancouver Island. The good news from all that is, although there would be a lot of damage and death, at least Seattle wouldn't get a 10-meter tsunami. It'd be a lot smaller because
right.
it's somewhat protected. But I'm drifting a little bit off topic and
No.
rambling.
Well, it brings up a good point, Tim, because I think we both live in this world where it's a tough balance because you want to be a responsible scientist, give accurate information, but you're also trying to like attract people to your videos. You want your channel to grow. And so we both know that the more sensationalized, dramatic topics will tend to do better. Tim's video on Wolfenite isn't going to do as well as Tim's
Oh no.
video on Yellowstone or the Cascadia subduction zone. So how do you balance that in your mind? And how do you ever have a little bit of a conflict between, ooh, I don't want to go too far with this because that might be sensationalizing too much, but I also want to make it appealing?
Yes. In fact, twice some people have somewhat rightfully, somewhat not rightfully, called me out for going for something that was too sensational. What I try to do, before I tell you my balance is, the only time I won't purposely go sensational or even make a sensationalized video if there is a very large disconnect, in my opinion, between public perception of an issue and a level of danger it poses and the actual level of danger it might reasonably pose under various circumstances, then I will cover it and mention as such that this could actually be a problem. Most of the time, that
Right.
usually is people are overreacting and it's absolutely it's harmless.
Yeah.
Like, oh, Yellowstone's going to explode because I read something on Facebook that a friend's brother
Right.
sent me, which Yellowstone's not doing anything.
Right.
Same with
No.
Long Valley Caldera.
Yes.
Um,
Live your 100 years in this planet and enjoy it because nothing will happen with those volcanoes while you're here. Right.
but only twice have I had to put something that was worried to be a little bit sensational. One of them was that Iceland video where I was legitimately concerned, although I didn't think it was the main possibility. I was worried that the Iceland eruption that occurred, if it had occurred between the last week of December and the first week of January, that it might create a fissure long enough due to the correlation between
Right.
volume
Magma
of lava,
volume. Yeah.
magma volume, that it might go past the protective wall in Greenvik. Thankfully, that didn't occur. Part of the reason was it erupted a lot sooner, more than a month earlier than
Yeah.
I was personally expecting. Second time, I think this is beforehand, was I spotted a magma intrusion, and I'm going to oversimplify. In Ethiopia, they have a lot of problems right now, and so their government has other issues to worry about, let's just say.
Right.
And so I noticed this uplift, earthquakes from distant seismometers detecting magnitude 4 events, a few magnitude 5. Sent I was asking around to who's the actual authority on this, and because
Yeah.
Ethiopia is still a big country, they have a lot of scientists,
Right.
and they actually had a bunch of universities. So I contacted the university. I told them what I found. I asked them if they were monitoring it, and I sent them my entire planned video script because I didn't want to panic people, but I also wanted to
You
alert
wanted to
people
inform them.
to
Yeah.
the
Right.
right level of danger because although we cannot prove it was a rhyolitic intrusion, all signs pointed to it being a rhyolitic intrusion at probably 5 kilometers depth, and it seemed gas rich just based on general behavior. It might not be. This is a lot. This is some
Yeah. Right.
speculation.
Right. You're just laying out all the
And
scenarios possible with the data. Sure.
so I purposely did not upload a video that day. I waited for them to respond. Got a response. They said, we approve of essentially what you have to say. You don't need to change anything. In fact, we encourage you to do this. But I still got some people that thought, oh, you're just trying to panic people for views.
Yeah. Overhyping it.
No,
Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah.
Like,
It's the way it's received, right? Like some people are like, "Thank you, that was informative," and it's all
yeah,
how
I
it's
even got I
received.
got a lot of those, which made me feel
Yeah.
because I know for a fact people have said at specific volcanoes that I have actually saved their life or convinced family or friends to leave an area that they may not otherwise would have.
Right.
So I know for a fact that I've saved lives.
Well, that's got to feel good.
Hmm,
Yeah.
I'm not going to mention which volcanoes this occurred at because I don't want to have potential liability issues if I
Right,
say
right.
which ones this occurred
Yeah,
at.
yeah, and people should not make, everyone makes their own decisions. The Tim at Geology Hub is not in charge of your personal decisions. He can offer
Mhm.
information just like anyone can, but everyone needs to, yeah, decide for themselves what risk is tolerable and all that stuff. So, well, cool. Well, let's do a couple more questions just to kind of wind down, Tim. This has been really fun and informative just to get to know you more and understand how you work with the channel and stuff. What do you think? What's the one thing you wish your viewers knew about you that maybe they don't? Like something. Yeah, that's a good question. Something that the viewers don't know about you that you wish they did.
So this isn't the perfect answer to this question, and a lot of my viewers already know this, but although I was never diagnosed with it formally, for all intents and purposes, I'm 99% sure that I have high functioning autism, formerly known as Asperger's. Now it's just called high functioning autism. And that is, although part of my setup and reading off of a script is a main reason for my monotone voice. It's also I believe it's called the flat effect, which is just that's part of the reason I sound like an AI. I have never used AI. I never will.
Right.
So that's why my voice sounds pretty flat. I try to add some emotion to it, but just because of parts of that disorder, it makes me sound a little weird.
Yeah, no, I think you and I talked about this before. I think you're reading off the script you've made, and maybe your autism and just the cadence that you speak at, it comes across for some people as sounding computer generated. But I think
Yes.
things like, you publicly saying this here, you showing up in this video, and people, and hearing you now, you don't sound like an AI bot right now.
Hey, Sean, why are you talking to an AI for this interview? That's
Yeah,
kind of strange.
right. And now we've got a video of you that's computer generated. That's not a real person either. So,
Yeah, and see, there's probably going to be some, I don't know, like visual effect clearly in that painting, which means it's
right.
misaligned, therefore it must be
Oh,
AI. So,
yes. Yeah. Well, you can't, I mean, yeah, the crazy kind of ideas that are out there, you just can't combat those. So, well, thanks for opening up
hmm.
and explaining that, Tim. I think it's important for people just to know, that you're wired differently, and we're all wired differently, and maybe that's. I think that's even for me. It makes it even more impressive that you found this great niche where you can take the knowledge and educational experience and your skill set and have such a great impact on people. So I for one think applaud you for that, because I think it's great that you've been able to find a niche. I mean, you talked about all those jobs you applied for, and they just didn't seem to fit you well, whether that was personality or whatever. They were looking for something else, but it's so great you've been able to find something that works well for you.
Hmm.
Maybe like last question. Let's see here. Any like advice from folks or lessons you've learned along the way? Maybe like your kind of like farewell speech, I suppose, or like.
Oh, before I answer that question, there
Sure.
was another just interesting fact
Yes.
about me. So I am legitimately 6'5" or 196 centimeters for
Oh,
those that use the correct system of measuring things.
yeah. Well, I haven't. Yeah, I
And
would have never guessed you were that tall, but you're tall.
I used to do a lot of baseball, still do basketball. It's weird. The sport I follow the most is football, largely college football, even though I have never myself played football and they wanted me to play football, but I just wasn't interested.
Yeah.
But that's just something amusing. So I love sports. I that's what I do to keep myself active, with the pitching motion.
Yeah. No, that's fun. That's something I wouldn't have guessed you were that tall. So it's interesting to know you're 6'5". Just when you sit in the chair, obviously you can't tell. So yeah,
Yeah, you can see from this point of view.
maybe let's just wrap up with just anything you want to talk about in terms of like advice you have for people learning geology, or maybe lessons you've learned along the way, just kind of like what you're hoping to like give to people with your geology videos.
So not all of my geology stuff is geology 101 type stuff, but it is okay to disagree with the scientist. It's okay to disagree with me. It's okay to um, want to search for new evidence. It's part of being a scientist is challenging existing ideas. That's how theories and just hypotheses are tested, and how theories are kept up, and because people keep continually testing them. And sometimes when a specific topic is unproven, it is perfectly okay for scientists to be reasonable and have a friendly disagreement with each other, such as, for example, I made a video about the remnants of the impactor that formed the moon called Theia, existing as the large low velocity seismic provinces, the two ones and the very lowermost mantle, that they seem to be where almost all the world's current hotspots are situated. They are underneath.
Hmm.
And that part isn't fully proven, but it's pretty
Yeah.
close to being
There's a
proven.
relationship there. Yeah.
The unproven bit is there's still a lot of confusion, and rightfully so, in figuring out, okay, Earth has plate tectonics. Venus doesn't really. Mars tried to have plate tectonics at one point, but it didn't. And Mars also had a very large impact. That's the whole northern impact basin on Mars. So why did Earth end up with plate tectonics? Why did that evolve there and not on, say, Mars or Venus? And my thought process is sort of like another step in the Drake equation. This is something that can only occur with a specific narrow series of events. First, you need a very large impacting body that's somewhat proportional to the planet. I don't know. So let's
Yeah.
just
The
say
Goldilocks
this,
kind of idea. Right.
yeah, Goldilocks.
Right.
And the planet itself needs to be less dense than the larger object it's colliding with, but at the same time, its mantle has to be more dense than what's colliding with so it can sink into the bottom. My thought is that has to occur, and it may, pure hypothesis, can't prove it. It just seems like something that could work and be tested. I might try to test it at some point in the future, maybe through computer modeling, that the sinking of that to the bottom of the planet may have somehow eventually started up the whole process
Hmm.
of plate
Yeah, the
tectonics and the
convection and
initial,
stuff. Yeah, right.
yeah, the initial very tiniest plates, because I am not satisfied with the existing theories on the very earliest plates. I also think they formed a little bit earlier than our current models suggest, but this is purely up for debate, and
Yeah.
I'd love to test it at some point.
Yeah, well, this is what's so fun about what you and I do is geology and science is not a static entity. It's
Mhm.
dynamic, it's evolving, and and you and I are grabbing these stories and things we think are of interest to the general public and trying to explain them as best we can. And it's not our job to say there's not definitive answers all the time. Here's a possible model, here's an interpretation, and then that might change. So someone like you might do a video on one topic, and then 5 years later you might do a video on the same topic but with a different spin or interpretation
Oh,
because
yes.
things have changed. So yeah.
One example that perfectly fits into what you said is I recently made a video sometime this year on so-called iron lavas that are incredibly dominant in iron, which doesn't make a lot of sense. And yet we find ore deposits that are deposited as almost as if lava,
Like molten
highly rich
iron.
in iron,
Yeah.
effused, and that is what occurred. But more recent evidence suggests that it wasn't actually iron lava. Rather, it was incredibly viscous and still fairly hot iron liquid that wasn't magma or lava.
Hmm.
And through a different separation process, somewhat similar to the molten sulfur that burns and occurs at the Ijen volcano in Indonesia or
Right.
Dalal in Ethiopia.
Right. Yeah,
That's, of
interesting.
course, gross oversimplification, but I'll have to eventually make an updated video because I honestly have to say the hypothesis the more recent paper put in seems like a much better fit than the
Yep.
old one, which definitely had a few problems.
Yeah, I mean that's what's fun is the science evolves. You and I are never going to run out of content.
Oh, for
Tim can
sure.
do a video
Mhm.
a day, and you'll have plenty of content moving forward. So, well, this has been super fun, Tim. I appreciate your time. It's been super interesting for me, and I'm sure all the viewers to get to know you a little bit better, understand the origin of the channel, kind of how you operate and how you work with things. So, I can't thank you enough for coming on. I'll be sure to link Tim's channel in my video description, but his channel is the most popular by far, and so I'm sure many of you already are aware of it. But we'll make sure if you're not, you can check out his videos. He puts out one a day. A lot of volcano videos, current events, and then just topics of interest like these fossils in Vermont and such. So, thanks so much, Tim. We appreciate your time.
Okay, glad to be on with you.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.